What makes you think he's any better than anybody else? If you don't like the American Democrat, why don't you just move to a foreign country where you don't have to go in the draft? Nobody's compelling you to live here. You don't like it, leave, man. There's planes flying out every day. Your kid's no different than anybody else. Everybody else served their time.
I'm Noam Chomsky. I'm on the faculty at MIT, and I've been getting more and more heavily involved in anti-war activities for the last few years. Beginning with writing articles and making speeches and speaking to congressmen and that sort of thing, and gradually getting involved more and more directly in resistance activities of various sorts.
Well, basically, I'm going to refuse induction. My father is supporting me since I'm under 21.
I forbid him to go. I'm protesting the war, and I'm protesting. I protest for everybody. Really, I'd like to make a test case of this, if I can, whether a father has rights over his minor son.
I've come to the feeling myself that the most effective form of political action that is open to a responsible and concerned citizen at the moment is action that really involves direct resistance, refusal to take part in what I think are war crimes, and attempts to raise the domestic cost of American aggression overseas through non-participation, support for those who are refusing to take part, in particular draft resistance.
We have a letter to the Attorney General. Dear Mr. Clark, I can no longer conscientiously carry cards of identification which in any way suggest complicity with or support of prosecution of the present war in Vietnam. I am therefore returning my selected service cards to you, fully aware that my willful refusal to carry these certificates is a violation of law. I am further symbolically dissociating myself from the selective service system by destroying these cards, which is another willful violation of the present law of this country.
Well, as far as the recent indictments are concerned, I'm as baffled as to the government's intentions as anyone else. It's possible that it's simply a matter of congressional pressure on the Justice Department to do something. However, the fact that they did indict such prominent and people who are so invulnerable in a way, suggests that there's some more political significance to it than that. And it's at least possible, I think, that this is the first act in a rather extensive domestic repression, an attempt to intimidate anti-war activity in a much more general fashion, and in particular to put down the incipient stages of resistance throughout the country. And I think it's at least possible that this is a prelude to a very significant escalation of the war, perhaps an invasion of North Vietnam.
I wish the government had given us a nice, clean, neat type of indictment. If they had said, for instance, to me personally, Reverend Coffin, you received draft cards in your hands, you delivered them into the hands of the Justice Department, therefore you violated Section 12 of the National Selective Service Act. But instead, they indicted us on a sweeping charge, a blunderbuss approach, which has a kind of a scaring effect. It could scare people either into inaction or into violence, because the charge of conspiracy, by any commonsensical notion, is ridiculous. We did everything just as publicly as we could. We never even met together. We never wrote. When we first met, the five of us, I introduced everybody to each other. I was the only one who knew everybody. Now, the other thing that will be crucial, I think, is to see what the government does at the time of the arraignment. If the government presses to put this trial off until after the election, then we'll know that the government is using a political ploy and really is trying desperately to avoid the kind of confrontation which we want.
My feeling is that our response to this indictment should be simply to continue and extend as widely as we can the kind of work we've been doing already. Whether this is just a sort of a random shot or whether it's the beginning of a large-scale attempt at repression, either way, what we have to do, I think, is try to put as much pressure as possible on the government.
Another approach is to think that we really are on the verge of something very bad in this country, something we use the terrible word fascism about. But I'm not sure that's true either. I don't think we're on the verge of fascism, though I don't know. And your analysis of society may be better than mine. But even if we are, well, especially if we are, that's finally a possibility that doesn't give us too many options, and that it almost is no good to know that fact. because we have to go ahead acting in certain ways now anyway, almost as if that's not going to happen. We have to act as if democracy still exists somewhere in this country. It may not. We do know that if, and this seems quite true, if the intent of these indictments or whatever other indictments may come soon, if this was an attempt to discourage the peace movement, they've already failed. And failed.
I think that we can see quite clearly some very, very serious defects and flaws in our society, our level of culture, our institutions, which are going to have to be corrected by operating outside of the framework that is commonly accepted. I think we're going to have to find new ways of political action.
I applied for conscientious objector, but I refused that later because I don't think it's enough. I want to stop the draft system.